guys, it's Kira and welcome back to another vlog. If you watched the end of last week's vlog, you'll know that this week I promised a reading vlog that was a little bit more spooky, and that is because this is the last full week before Halloween. So if I was going to do some spooky reading, it was now or never, and I have opted for now. So this weekend we're going to be reading spooky books from one particular author, and really there's no prizes for guessing who because I do these types of reading vlogs pretty much every year. But this weekend is going to be dedicated to reading Stephen King because he is just not only my favourite horror author, but I feel like just objectively pretty much the best horror author out there and certainly the most well-renowned, and I have had a really great time the last few years. I think we might be going on for like the 4th year in a row maybe of reading Stephen King books in Halloween time, and I've just had such a great time of exploring his books, getting to know some of his works and just seeing all of the incredible, spooky, terrifying things that he has written. And of course I have a Stephen King shelf on my bookshelves dedicated to his books, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't think this shelf is anywhere near big enough because his bibliography is just, the magnitude of the amount of his works is off the scale, and this shelf just does not do justice to that. But I am trying to be a little bit more mindful with book buying at the moment, just in terms of if I've got authors that I know I want to read, trying to read the books I already own rather than buying new ones first. So while I know that Stephen King has had actually a couple of new books out recently that I kind of do want to read, I did find 3 books on my shelves of his works that I haven't read yet, so I'm going to be starting with those ones this weekend and just seeing how far we get. Today is Saturday the 22nd of October, and so I'm just going to be spending the next few days. I have Monday off work as well, so an extra day of the weekend booked off, and just over the next week just trying to read as many Stephen King books as I possibly can before Halloween arrives and it is officially the spookiest day of the year. So with that said, I've looked through the 3 books that I do have on my shelves already and chosen one clear winner to start with, because this book, when I read the blurb of it, just really reminded me of a TV show and I just really wanted to see what it was like, and that book is The Institute. So I'm going to read you the blurb and see whether any of you guys have that same feeling of reminiscence to a particular TV show, and if you do, leave a comment down below and we can see if we thought the same thing. So the blurb says, "There's only one way out. Luke Ellis, a super smart 12-year-old with an exceptional gift, is the latest in a long line of kids abducted and taken to a secret government facility hidden deep in the forest in Maine. Here, kids with special talents, telekinesis and telepathy, like Luke's new friend Kalisha, Nick and Iris, are subjected to a series of experiments. There seems to be no hope of escape until Luke teams up with an even younger boy whose powers of telepathy are off the scale. Meanwhile, far away in a small town in South Carolina, former cop Tim Jameson, looking for the quiet life, has taken a job working for the local sheriff. He doesn't know he's about to take on the biggest case of his career." 2 seconds to write down if you thought of any TV show that sounded like this book. And for me, as soon as I read that blurb, it just sounded like Stranger Things. Now, I watched Stranger Things for the first time this summer, so me and Jay watched like all 4 seasons, which was perfect timing because the chapter 2 of season 4 had just been released. It could not be more perfect timing. But I really loved Stranger Things, but this just sounds so similar to that in the sense of these special abilities kids being taken to government facilities and basically harnessed and used for their powers by people who have more power than them. It's interesting, isn't it, actually, now that I say it out loud, because these people, like Papa in Stranger Things, have more power than 11, but only perceived power, because realistically the children who have these powers are more powerful, but it's just in the way that they are given this feeling of not being as powerful that they're then able to be used for their power. So it's power is just a very interesting construct because it's one thing and it's another at the same time, and I feel like this is definitely a power play in this situation, or at least that's what I'm guessing is going to happen with this book. And then the addition of a small town cop slash sheriff like we have Hopper in Stranger Things. I just felt like this was very much of the Stranger Things vibe, but it also sounded a little bit similar to me to The Shining and Dr. Sleep especially, because that is a sequel to The Shining, but it's all about this child who has these incredible powers of telekinesis and telepathy and things like that, and being basically hunted down to try and have her powers basically harvested for people who want them to sort of live eternally. So I feel like there's a similarity there, and I think The Shining obviously is Stephen King's most well-known work, and then Dr. Sleep adds on to that, and I feel like this just sounds like it's diving further into that world of how power can be sort of like misused or taken from people, and it sounds very interesting. So can't wait to start this one. But me and Jay are just about to head out for a little walk. He's planned as a walk. I don't know where we're going. I know it's near some rivers, so hopefully it'll be a really nice autumn walk. And I'm going to bring the book with me because I think we've got about an hour's drive between here and where we're starting our walk. So I'm going to make a start on the Institute while we're driving, and then I'll catch up with you once we're home and let you know how I'm getting on with my Stephen King weekend.
Coming, I can feel it. The breeze brings goosebumps to my skin. Tonight the whiskey feels stronger. Gasoline on hidden desires. So I'll throw
Now, I'm not being over dramatic when I say I think that might have been one of the nicest walks we've ever done. Jay picked such a good place. So we started in a little town village place called Masham, which had a car park, which is always good. It also had toilets, which again gives it an extra tick in my terms of like rating places to start walks, because obviously a lot of the time you've like driven quite a long way to get somewhere, and if the place is just like a lay-by or whatever, where you just like park the car and then start walking straight away, and there's no like toilets, facilities, cafes, anything like that, obviously it's like not the end of the world. But when places do have those features, it definitely makes them even better. And on that note, it also had a couple of cafes to choose from, so we went and got drinks. I got myself an oat milk chai latte, Jay got a caramel latte, and then we set straight off on our walk, and it was a river walk. It took you past 2 rivers, and it was a perfect loop, so you end up exactly right back where you started, which again is another thing that I just love, because it's nice when you don't have to like repeat back on yourself and you just end up right back where you're supposed to be. So we went past the River Burn and the River or the River Ure, I'm not really sure how you pronounce it, but it's U-R-E. And those are 2 rivers that I have not been to before, but they were both so lovely, and they were quite different as well, because the Burn is a much smaller river and it was like very windy, and it just looked so like picturesque and very, very natural. And then the was like much wider, and it was huge, and it was flowing so quickly because we've had a lot of rain recently, but they both were just like surrounded by gorgeous autumn trees, and it was such a nice walk. We got really lucky with the weather because, like I said, we have had a lot of rain recently, but although it was quite cloudy for some of the walk, no rain ended up falling on us, which was nice. And it was also surprisingly really like quiet, although it was such a lovely route and easy to follow, such a great loop to get you like to and from your start place without having to do too much directions. There was hardly any people around, so 10 out of 10 if anyone is like fairly local. I would 100% recommend that place for walking, because it was just really lovely and it was a nice way to spend our Saturday. But aside from that, I did, as promised, make a start on reading The Institute in the car. I read some on the way there, although I have to say the heaters in the car made me so sleepy, so I did actually have a little nap on the way there, but I ended up reading more on the way back, and I'm now on page 55, so just at the beginning. This is quite a large book, the text is quite small, and it's just shy of 500 pages, so I'm very much just scratching the surface. But it starts with an intro to the main character, Tim, who is the police officer, as I mentioned on the like blurb of the book. It's like this police officer guy, or an ex-police officer, who then ends up working for a like small town sheriff, and he's trying to find like a quieter pace of life. So we've gotten introduced to him, to the town that he's working in, and gotten some like key backstory characters going on. And then right at the end of his section, because it's kind of going to split between, I guess, like his perspective and then Luke, the younger character, and so right at the end of Tim's first section there is like a crime that takes place, and then he's offered like a full-time job in in the police department in this small town rather than just working as like, I think it was called like a door knocker. I don't know what that is as a job. I don't know if it's like a small town thing or something, but basically he gets like promoted from that position to an actual like police deputy. So that's what we've got with Tim, and then we then get introduced to Luke, our other character, who is an extremely intelligent young boy who's I think about 12 years old, and at the beginning of the book his parents are called into his school and basically told that he's going to take the SATs and is going to go to college and major in 2 different things at 2 different universities in the same area, and his parents are like, I don't know if this is a good idea. He's only 12, but the school's like, I really think you should go for it. And so he ends up taking those SATs, and then his parents take him out to celebrate. And then we get to the part where he becomes abducted, which is not a spoiler because it literally says that on the blurb of this book. So we're very much at the beginning, and what I'm interested in is, you know, Luke is going over to Maine, and then Tim is in South Carolina, so they're not anywhere near each other geographically. So I'm interested to see like how these 2 stories are going to converge, and at what point that is going to happen. But I am very much enjoying this book and looking forward to reading some more. But now that we're home, I'm about to go make me and Jay some dinner. We're having just a really easy dinner, pasta and garlic bread this evening. And in the spirit of Stephen King, I am going to put on a new film which has just been added to Netflix quite recently, which is from one of Stephen King's short stories. So I think a couple of years ago in one of my Stephen King readathons, I ended up reading his new book at the time called If It Bleeds, which had been marketed as something of a sequel to The Outsider, which was a book that I really liked. But when I opened it, it turns out that it wasn't just a sequel to The Outsider. It was actually a collection of short stories, and one of those short stories has been turned into a film, which is called Mr. Harrigan's Phone. So I wouldn't say it was a particular standout favourite of mine. In fact, that book as a whole wasn't my favourite. Like I can really enjoy some of Stephen King's short stories, Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me, which are both different names as books, but those are the film adaptations. I love both of those stories and I love both of those films. So I do really like some of his short stories, but the If It Bleeds one, I think I was just a little bit, I guess, like bummed that it had been kind of promoted or marketed as something slightly different, and it wasn't really clear that it was short stories. And then when I opened it and found out that it was just like a smidge disappointing. So I wouldn't say that I particularly loved Mr. Harrigan's Phone, but it's in the top 10 currently on Netflix, and seeing as I'm doing a Stephen King weekend, I thought that we might as well watch it with dinner. So gonna make some pasta, gonna watch Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and then depending on how the evening goes, I will either be dead asleep or I'll do some more reading, and I guess you will find out in the morning.
Let it burn. Let it burn. Let it burn. Let it burn.
2 very important updates. The first one being that Mr. Harrigan's Phone is categorically one of the worst films that we have ever tried to watch. We ended up turning it off about 45 minutes in because literally nothing had happened, and it was the longest 45 minutes of my entire life. I have to say, I know obviously roughly what happens because of having read the short story, but it was so much duller in film format, and that is a very rare thing because obviously normally films like inject more interest into the story and make it like more dynamic and more interesting because obviously they're working to a visual sort of like brief, I guess, rather than a written one. And obviously, as I mentioned before, I love the Stand By Me movie, I love the Shawshank Redemption movie, and because both of those are based on short stories and they've adapted Stephen King's writing into like a feature-length film, and they've added more detail in and created new plot lines in order to like beef it up enough to be a full film length, I just had expectations for this one that it was going to be good, and quite frankly it was so disappointing. So we ended up turning that off about 45 minutes in, and then we ended up putting on American Psycho instead because Jay has read that book, I haven't, but neither of us had seen the film and we wanted something kind of like creepy to watch, and that whole film was like quite good. It was like a bit bizarre and surrealist. I feel like that's kind of like the vibe that it was going for. It's like you can't quite tell, is it actually happening, is it just in his head, what's going on, is it all made up? I don't really know, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a fun film in terms of like, it was definitely a horror, or I guess like more of a thriller. I don't really know exactly how to categorize it, but it wasn't like uber gory or like particularly scary. It was more just like bizarre, because you're getting this very intense look into this psychopathic person's mindset, and you're like, this is so bizarre to think about someone actually thinking like this. So it was good. There were a few like moments where I was like, ugh, I don't really want to watch that, but for the most part, it was a good film and well made, and also quite short, about an hour and 40 minutes, but very fast paced, especially compared to the bit of Mr. Harrigan's Phone that we watched, because that was so slow. And I think the films were about the same length all in all, about an hour and 40, but yeah, American Psycho just paced so much better. So we ended up watching that movie, and then by the time we'd finished that, I was well and truly ready for bed. But the other update I wanted to share is just that I'm so glad that we decided to go for our walk yesterday, because this morning is very, very grey, very rainy, and we are going out today. We're going for lunch with Jay's parents. We're going for a roast dinner at Toby Carvery, which is one of my favourite places because it's so easy to get a vegan version of like a roast dinner, whereas most places are very like meat centric. It's quite easy, which is nice for both myself and for Jay, because although he's not vegan, he doesn't really eat meat and is quite fussy, so it's a good option for both of us. But we are planning to go for a little walk beforehand, but nothing as long as yesterday's walk, so I think it's just going to be a case of raincoats on, go out for a little walk, and then warm up with a roast dinner, which will be so welcome after that. But I haven't managed to do any more reading of the Institute yet, but as I did yesterday, I am going to bring the book along with us for the drive over to Leeds, try and do a little bit of reading in the car, and then catch up with you with some more thoughts on the book later on this afternoon, because we then have a few hours free, and then later on this evening we're going to go to my dad's house to watch the F1, which is the Texas Grand Prix this week. So it's starting at about 8 p.m, so we'll probably have a good few hours between lunch and when we need to go over there, where I can try and get some reading done.
Till all that's left is ash. Another vice, grab my old lighter. This cigar helps me slow down. Thinking back to all I've loved and lost. My heart is full and aching strong. So I'll throw another load on the fire. Let it burn.
So it is now Monday morning, and me and Jay got up early to watch the final episode of House of the Dragon, which was officially on last night, but because we were watching the F1 we weren't able to watch the show live, so we saved it for this morning. And wow, I don't even know what to say. I'm like, first of all, so upset that it's over, because I don't think that it's meant to air again until 2024, so we've probably got like a year and a half before we get the next instalment, and I have loved this show so much, so I'm just sad that it's over, but I'm also just like flabbergasted about what happened at the end of the season, and just like knowing what's going to happen, because we've also simultaneously been rewatching Game of Thrones alongside it, and there have been so many spoilers for House of the Dragon that I wouldn't have even like picked up on the first time around watching it. Like Joffrey says something when he takes Marjorie down into like the dragon pit beneath King's Landing, and he sort of tells her about what happens to some of the characters. Shireen Baratheon, she's like reading the story to the Dance of the Dragons and talking about it to Sir Davos and to Stannis, And it's the kind of thing where, because you didn't know those characters' names when you were watching Game of Thrones, they just sounded like other Targaryens, other old kings and queens and all that stuff, and you don't really like pay attention to it, whereas obviously this time around we've been like super attuned to like noticing it, and it's like, oh my god, bad things are going to happen to a lot of these characters, and so I'm like excited but also apprehensive about what's to come. But yeah, the series was so good. I think the calibre of the cast has just been like such a top tier cast. They've done such a good job, and yeah, I'm excited but so sad that it's over. So that was how I started my Monday morning. I didn't do any reading while I was watching the F1, but in between our lunch and going over to my dad's to watch the race, I did manage to read, I think, about 130 pages of the Institute, which has now brought me up to page like 180. So very much enjoying this book. Obviously, as I mentioned, the first sections that I read, there was one section from the like police guy Tim's perspective, and then the other was from Luke's perspective, but everything else since then has all been Luke and his story. So it's all been set at the Institute itself, which I guess, given the title of the book, does make sense that that is like the primary setting, but I'm still just so in the dark about how these two plot lines are going to converge, and I have no idea at what point, for what reason, and how those two things are going to intertwine. But what we've read so far about the Institute and how these children are being treated like test subjects is very disturbing, quite dark, and you just see this like disconnect that these workers have between like children, and then how they see these children with special powers because they're just viewing them purely as test subjects and as things to benefit them rather than as like entities and beings of their own. So it's very interesting, very dark. You can see that there's like a lot of confusion for the children, but they find this sense of like camaraderie with each other, but it's quite sad, and I just don't know where it's going to go. So I'm excited to read more of this one, but I think I mentioned at the start of this vlog, I actually have a day booked off work today, and that is not for Stephen King Readathon, that is just a happy coincidence. The reason I had booked this day off was because every year me, my mum and my sister get together in October and do a Christmas movie day, which just always marks the start of like the festive season as we start to get towards the end of October and into November, and I know we start celebrating Christmas early, and it is maybe a little bit too early for some people, but for us it's always such a fun day to just like have some snacks, maybe do some baking, watch some good Christmas films, and just have a really cozy festive day. So I'm heading over to my mum's house to meet her and my sister. We're going to have that movie day, so I obviously won't be bringing my book with me, but I will be having an exceptionally festive time. So I, for one, am very excited about that. And then when I get home this evening, watching American Psycho the other day has inspired me and Jay to pick a few films over the next week, because it is now officially 1 week until Halloween, and we're going to be trying to watch one scary movie every night between now and Halloween. So we've got a bit of a short list featuring things like Jay wants me to watch Alien and The Thing. There's also Hide and Seek, a Jigsaw or a Saw film, potentially It Chapter 2, because whilst I have seen It, the original, like the full movie from like the 80s, we've watched It Chapter 1, but I don't think we ever actually watched It Chapter 2, so that's on the agenda as well. And there were a few other films we've kind of looked across Amazon, Disney Plus and Netflix and just seen what looks good. So that is going to be the plan for the evening, but hopefully I will find some time to do some more reading of the Institute today. But I'll catch up with you probably at my mum's house when we are getting started on our festive day.
Let it burn. Let it burn. Let it burn. Till all that's left is ash.
Now, I don't want to make any like premature statements that I'll regret, but I'm now 280 pages into The Institute, and I think that this book is going to be in my top 3 Stephen King reads ever, because I'm enjoying it so much. As of right now, I would say that my top 3, discounting this book, would probably be Misery, Doctor Sleep, and either The Outsider or It, which I read last year, but I think that those two spots, which are definitely enjoyable reads and ones that I would recommend in terms of Stephen King books, but I think that this book is going to go above that. I think that The Institute is going to take my number 3 spot because I just think it's so like gripping, captivating, well written, really interesting, and it's so similar in themes to Dr. Sleep, which obviously, like I said, is in my number 2 spot currently. So I feel like the fact that they're so similar just makes me feel like I'm definitely going to love this one. And although there's still about 100 and something pages left to go, I just have a very strong feeling that I'm going to really like this one. I do think it's interesting though to compare these books because in like basic themes we have 2 stories which focus on children with these like telekinetic and telepathic powers who are being pursued by adults who basically serve to benefit themselves by harnessing the powers of these children. But in this book we have this like I guess group of like renegades who are working as a unit trying to like pursue these children and use them purely for personal gain. And so it feels very, I guess, like a cowboy version of this book, whereas this one feels a lot more sinister in my opinion somehow, because it isn't like this group of evil people who have just decided to pursue children for their own personal gain. It's like an actual institution where children are literally being like taken and like I guess methodically used in a way that just feels a lot more calculated and sinister, and you don't yet fully understand the reasons behind it, at least where I'm at in the book. And so it just feels like a lot more dark, even though it's obviously, this one does have a lot of like dark themes because obviously essentially the goal is the same. There are people using children with powers for their own personal benefit, but I do think the distinction between like a group of like rogues kind of doing something criminal, but they seem like a group of criminals kind of banded together, versus a group of people who seem like very official, well trained, there are like actual medical professionals here. It just feels a lot more calculated and a lot darker. So very interested to see what happens, where we find out about how like what the children are being used for, because that's still not yet clear. And finally, the thing that I'm excited to find out about is how on earth these 2 plot lines converge, because I think I've mentioned this every single update I've given, but we got this introduction to this guy Tim, who is the like cop who's working in South Carolina, and he was in it at the very beginning of the book, and then we moved on to Luke's perspective, and we haven't heard anything about Tim since that first little section of the book, so I have no idea what his role in this story is going to be, when he's going to come into it and why, but I'm excited to find out. So there we have it. I'm making that early like prediction that this is going to become a favourite Stephen King for me, because so far I really think that it will be. So with that said, today we are helping my mum move house, so we are going to go pick up a rental van, drive that to her house, and then me and Jay are picking up some like furniture bits and helping her move them over to her new house. So Jay will obviously be doing the driving, so I will be bringing the Institute with me and trying to do a little bit of reading on the go. And then this evening we are concluding our Halloween film watching situation. So far we've watched 5, so we're counting American Psycho. We've also watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hide and Seek, The Thing. Last night we watched The Sixth Sense, and then tonight Jay wants to watch Aliens, one of the Alien films, but I think it's the one that's just called Aliens. So after that I think we'll catch up with you and let you know our like ranking, because I feel like we've watched some very good films this week, so I'm excited to see where they all go in my ranking of films. But for now, heading out to go and pick up the van, and I will be trying to do a little bit of reading on the go. I am so nearly done with reading the Institute. I'm less than 100 pages to go, and I would have been finished by now if only not for the fact that I spoke to you yesterday, and as we all know, with weekend plans, I'm quite disorganised. So I made my comparison between Dr. Sleep and the Institute, and then I had to leave straight away to pick up the rental van. And lo and behold, when I opened my bag to read the book in the van, which book had I brought with me? Dr. Sleep is the book that I had brought, which is a book that I obviously have already finished, and Institute was back on my bookshelves because I am, quite frankly, an idiot. But I'm almost done with this book now. It's so good and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm planning to finish it today. But I wanted to talk to you now about all of the Halloween films that me and Jay have been watching over the last few days. So, Jay, do you want to join me? So, for the last few days, 7 days to be precise, we've been watching Halloween films pretty much every night. And so we have watched a selection of films, some that we decided together, some that I put forward and some that Jay put forward. And so we kind of split the vote kind of thing, decided to watch some things that I have refused to watch for months and months and months that Jay wanted to watch, and then other things that are maybe a bit more up my street that you wouldn't normally watch. So in the end, we put on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, American Psycho, Hide and Seek, The Thing, The Sixth Sense, and Aliens. Is that all of them?
I think we only watched 6.
Yeah, so those are the films, and I was interested because of the fact...
We also watched the horror show that is Mr. Hannigan's Phone.
But
don't forget American Psycho.
I said American Psycho, that was part of the 6.
Oh, maybe we watched 7.
So, Mr. Harrigan's Phone.
Hide and Seek, you said that?
Yeah.
I wasn't really paying attention.
Mr. Harrigan's Phone we watched half of, and then that got cancelled. But then we went on to American Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hide and Seek, The Thing, Sixth Sense, and then Aliens. So
that's
6.
7.
But I wasn't counting Mr. Harrigan's Phone because we didn't watch all of that.
Oh man, okay.
Okay, so we watched 6 films all the way through, and because they were such a like ragtag bunch of films, and some that would have been ones I would have never chosen to watch myself, and others that I really wanted to watch, I thought it'd be fun to do a ranking of the films. So
honourable mention to the films we didn't get to.
Yes.
It Chapter 2.
It Chapter 2 was high on my list that I really wanted to watch it, but it isn't on any streaming platforms for free. And we obviously could have paid for it on Amazon Prime, but we wanted to kind of stick as much as possible to the ones that were on, you know, Disney Plus and Netflix and on Prime, because then we didn't have to pay for films basically. So
I can't remember what else. I think
Jigsaw was on the list as well.
Jigsaw was on the list. That's free on Netflix. And then also The Cabin in the Woods, but I don't think I could find that anywhere.
No.
Maybe that was Amazon again for £4. But
yeah.
So I think there was anything else. I think that was it.
I think that was the short list basically.
Oh, there was that film. Hunger, Fear. What was it called?
Oh, Fresh, which
it.
has Daisy Edgar Jones in it, and we also were considering watching it, like the original from the 80s, which again was paid on Amazon, so we didn't end up getting to that one. But we watched those 6 films. Do you have a clear least favourite?
Oh shit, Mr. Hannigan's Phone.
That's not. We're not counting Mr. Harrigan's Phone.
Don't watch it.
Don't. Yeah, we wouldn't recommend. Should we say it on 3?
Oh, I don't even think I thought of it. Least favourite of all of the films that we watched. Okay.
Right.
3.
3.
Wait. Oh, least favourite
Fully
of watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Hide and
Texas Chainsaw
Seek.
Massacre.
Hide and Seek.
Okay. Reason?
No spoilers, but I was liking it and then I didn't like it.
Okay. I, on the other hand, really liked Hide and Seek, and I think it's definitely up there, maybe my second favourite of the one we watched. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was actually a really great film in terms of the genre that it fits into. It was a slasher, and it was very much like, it was a classic slasher style film, but compared to the other ones we watched, which all had like a much stronger plot line, I just felt like that was the weakest film and the one that I had like the least connection to, but it was still good.
Yeah, I thought it could have been way worse.
Yeah.
Way worser.
Way worse.
Way worser.
Okay, what's next for you?
We're going up the rankings.
Going up the rankings.
Oh my god. I would probably say Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
For me next, this is a tough one, but I'd probably say The Thing.
Okay.
And it's tough because I really liked all the other films on the list.
I think it is quite a tight
but
pick,
The Thing, I feel like was very similar to Aliens, but I felt like Aliens was just a better one. So
I'll tell you what, I'd never seen The Thing, and I really did enjoy it, but after watching Aliens last night, I was like, just different league.
And they're very similar in the style of film. So there we go. In your 3rd spot then? 5th spot?
The 6th film, so this is 4th
spot.
I would say Sixth Sense.
Okay.
Based purely on my multitude of world-breaking questions.
Yeah, you do bring all those world breakers.
What about that? What about this? Why can't I do this? And kind of is explained away by some stuff.
For me then, in the middle spot is American Psycho.
Okay.
Liked it, very
Yeah.
good film, and it was obviously, we have to credit that film in terms of inspiring the whole week of watching Halloween themed films, but
How do we even get onto American Psycho, do you remember?
you just thought of it when we were watching Mr. Harrigan's Fun. You were just like, I know what else we can watch, and then you just found it on
Maybe I
Amazon.
saw a clip of Christian Bale somewhere, and maybe think of it.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but it was a great film, but I feel like it's probably the least Halloween-y, maybe.
Yeah.
So, there we go.
Yeah.
Third spot.
I'd put The Thing
Okay.
third spot, yeah. Like I said before. Good.
But not as good as some of the
Not
others.
as good as some of the others.
Okay, then for me, third spot is Aliens.
Mhm.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like the biggest shock of this list, because I have resisted for I think almost a year now,
Yeah,
you trying to put
possibly.
Aliens on, because I seem to
It's
remember
on Disney Plus now.
it was
it's
like around
yeah.
your birthday last year, you wanted me to watch that, and instead I ended up watching Scarface, which I also put up a lot of resistance to, and also really
What's
liked.
better, Scarface or Aliens?
Probably Scarface.
Yeah.
But Aliens was really good, and it was an alien-y film, but equally I think it had more plot than I was
Yeah.
expecting, so that was a big,
Just
a big win
reference,
for me.
not Alien, the second film, Aliens.
Aliens.
Yeah.
We skipped the first
We
one,
skipped the first one, yeah.
but it was great, really liked it. Okay, spot 2.
American Psycho, it was great.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before, and that was really good.
Good film. It's like a weird
Christian
one
Bale's
because
good.
it's just like very surreal
Yeah.
and funny in like
Yeah.
a very strange
It's
way.
kind of like Jim Carrey.
Yeah,
Jim
a little
Carrey.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
And my second is Hide and Seek, as I mentioned before. I really liked it. I feel like it's very similar to the one that's in my first spot. And the only reason it's lower than that is I feel like it's like a slightly less good version of the film that I watched. The film that I'm putting in first. But I really liked it. I feel like it was like creepy. I personally wasn't opposed to the twist, although I can see what your
You
opinion
saying
was.
there's a twist is a
It's
spoiler.
a psychological thriller.
Is a spoiler because now people will be expecting a twist.
Anyway,
I did also mention that I knew that Sixth Sense had a twist.
I think everyone knows that Sixth Sense is a twist.
Yeah, so I did kind of say that it'd be nice to watch it without knowing that, but I think I heard that in high school.
Yeah.
How do you miss that?
Yeah.
You can't, can you?
It is an M. Night Shyamalan, and as they
Shyamalan,
say in Philly, there's always a Shyamalan twist,
There's always
so
a Shyamalan
you knew
twist.
there was a twist
Yeah.
coming for that, even if you've not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
heard of it. But yeah,
What
that
much of a
puts-
twist isn't happening with Mark Wahlberg, but that's alright.
Is that an M. Night Shyamalan as well?
I think so, yeah.
Alright. So my first spot then obviously goes to The Sixth Sense, which I personally think is so good. I feel like it's really chilling. I feel like Haley Joel Osment is like such a good child actor. I really think he did a great job in this one. And although I had watched this one before, I recall watching it like years and years ago and not knowing the twist when I watched it, and I do think it has so much impact when you don't know what's coming, but it's still enjoyable to watch if you do know what's coming, because I also think there's lots of things that you then notice as like little Easter eggs and hints towards it that you wouldn't necessarily think about if you were watching it blind, but
Yeah.
when you know what's coming, you kind of more
Yeah.
attuned to it, so I really liked it.
Yeah.
And that puts Aliens as your number one.
They mostly come at night. Mostly.
Mostly.
If she says mostly, I can't remember if she was at dark, to be honest.
No,
but
she says at
yeah.
night.
Yeah, but that's good.
It's
yeah,
very good.
Aliens, it was good. It's been a few years since I've seen it, and I
Yeah.
was worried it was just a dumb action film, but plot is good in it.
So good.
Yeah.
So, there we
Shout
go.
out to the original female badass Ripley,
Yeah. Sigourney Weaver.
unless there's other ones.
I feel like she's like,
I mean, that was like late 70s into the 80s.
yeah. And she's, what's interesting about this one is that they don't like pair her off, they don't make it like,
Yeah.
oh, she's a badass female, but then she has to get with a guy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like all about her
Yeah.
taking the power, saving the day. So it was a great film. Really, really, really surprised by that
Big
one.
fan.
So much better than I expected. So there we have it. We have concluded our Halloween film watching.
Halloween!
Probably watched more films this week than I have watched in the last year.
It's probably going to be a big miss now, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's
probably,
alright.
but that's okay. We do still have a few good ones on our list that we'll probably get to over the next, few months or whatever. But
Yeah.
that was this week. So there we go. I'm gonna go have a shower, wash my hair, and then spend the rest of the afternoon trying to finish off reading The Institute. wet hair, but as promised I had my shower and then got straight on to the last few chapters of The Institute, which I've just finished and rated 5 stars because this book was so good. I don't really know what I was expecting from it aside from the fact that the blurb really reminded me of Stranger Things, but then since reading the book obviously there's been a lot of resemblance to Dr. Sleep, another favourite of mine. It definitely has Stranger Things vibes in the sense of having like this band of children sort of like grouping together to overcome the odds, and it definitely has like a reminiscence to that, but also for anyone who has read or watched Dr. Sleep it feels very similar to that as well, particularly in terms of the pacing and the way that the revelation of events kind of happens piece by piece by piece and then accumulates in like a really dramatic sort of action-packed end section of the book, whereas the rest of it is, I don't want to say slow burn, but definitely slower, and then it acclimatizes in this like hugely dramatic conclusion, and that's similar to both Dr. Sleep and also to The Shining as well, which obviously has some similarities to this book, at least in terms of like the special powers that Danny has in The Shining. So really would recommend this book so highly. It's definitely in my top 3 Stephen King books now. I just think this was so enjoyable, and although I kind of started this reading vlog as a Stephen King reading vlog, which I have done now for the last several years as we get towards Halloween time, and I haven't read as many Stephen King books as I normally would. Typically I've done like 24-hour readathons and managed to read like 3 Stephen King books in one day, or even last year I did a weekend long one where I managed to read the whole of It, which is obviously rather gigantic. But this week I have had a much slower pace of reading, but I'm not even mad about it. Even though I haven't read as many Stephen King books as I potentially would have liked to, the one that I did pick up by chance ended up just being incredible and a new favourite of mine, so I can't complain, and I would recommend this book so highly to everyone because I think it was just so well written. The pacing, the characters, the sort of like drama that was going on, and then the paranormal elements as well, just combined into such an enjoyable reading experience, and not a particularly scary one as well. So I would say this is a great book to go for if you are interested in Stephen King but you're not necessarily big on horror and you don't want to be scared. The paranormal elements of this are simply telepathy and telekinesis, so there's no monsters or anything like that. The monsters, if you will, are the people in the book, which I think is very interesting and something that I really like in my favourite Stephen King book, Misery, which is all about this sort of relationship, or rather I don't want to say relationship, but interaction between 2 characters, and there is no paranormal activity in that book whatsoever. But what makes it so tense and so engaging is the fact that it's sort of exploring what people can do and what people are capable of, which in a way is scarier than anything paranormal because I guess it's more relatable to real life. So I feel like this is a great one to go for if you're not interested in going into something that has a like monster or something really terrifying, because it has a, I guess, softer approach to Stephen King but also captures what makes his writing style so captivating. So yeah, I think what we can say clearly is that I would really recommend this book. It was so good. And it's brought me right up to Halloween, which is quite perfect because it is the 30th today and tomorrow is Halloween. So there we have it. I hope you have enjoyed hearing my thoughts on The Institute, as well as all of the scary movies that Jay and I have watched over the last few weeks, or the last few days rather. But if you have any Stephen King books that you think I should try to get to next, or if you have any scary movie recommendations, leave them in the comments down below. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.